Hello, Erica here. Today I wanted to do a video about getting started and how to start reading graphic novels and comics when you have, for most of your life, been a lover of novels. So I actually didn't start reading comics until about probably 2.5 years ago, so this has not been a lifelong love affair of mine. I've just recently gotten into it more or less, and I didn't read comic books as a kid, none of that. So I wanted to talk about a few things and then do some recommendations of both series and standalones that I think are great places for getting started. So when I first started reading comics, I hated it. I was really overwhelmed by the fact that there's so much going on a page and it's not just text for me to read, and my eyes would get distracted and would jump all over the place, and I couldn't follow the story sequentially the way I was supposed to. And that can be a difficult thing getting started. If you are just used to reading pages full of text, that are very linear and laid out for you, it's interesting to start reading comics. And the only advice I can really give you is the more that you do it, the more you'll get used to it. So, sorry I can't really help you otherwise, but you'll kind of realize how different styles of paneling flow, and you'll get used to kind of taking in the pictures and the text all at the same time. It's important to remember, too, that the pictures and the text are both telling the story, and you can't really have one without the other in most comic books. So it is important to pay attention to them. Also, when I first started reading comics, I realized I would just read the text and look at half the pictures really quickly, but not really pay attention, and I would totally miss things. They would totally pass me right by. But now that I'm not so overwhelmed by the format anymore, I find that reading graphic novels and comics is a really relaxing and fun experience. It's really nice if I'm in a reading slump or just need a break from something heavier that I'm reading at the time to pick up a comic, sit down for an hour, and just kind of immerse myself in the experience for a little while with no pressure to kind of keep going, because you can you can buy comics in single issues, which are going to be really quick reads, or even a trade paperback like this one. It takes me about an hour to read, and it's just a really relaxing and fun experience. It's kind of tune out just for that hour, and then you're done. Another thing I wanted to touch on briefly is that some people kind of fret about how to count graphic novels and comics on Goodreads, for example, and towards their reading goals. And it's really funny because the panel's website just put an article out about this today that I literally just saw 2 minutes ago, and I was already planning on talking about this. I haven't read the whole article yet, but I'm sure it's fabulous. I'll link to it down below. The only advice I can give you is you need to do what feels right for you. I do count trade paperbacks towards my goals on Goodreads, but I also pad my goal a little bit at the start of the year to allow for that. And I pad my page number goal as well, because obviously, this is a page, but it doesn't take as long to read as a full page of texts in a novel-sized book. So I just keep in mind that I'm going to be reading those things, and that's fine for me. My goals are for myself. It's not for me to brag about how much I read or whatever. And so it doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, don't count them. There are ways to do that too. But like I said, your goals are about what you want, and it's about how you interpret your goals and not what the outside world thinks. So whatever you want to do is fine in that regard. So really quickly, I wanted to recommend a few series and a few standalone graphic novels for if you are interested in kind of diving into the comics world. I know that it can be completely overwhelming. I was really overwhelmed at first as to what to read and what different terms meant and stuff like that. So I'm going to walk you through it a little bit. We'll start with the series first. So I consume most of my graphic novels in trade paperback form, and a trade comic or graphic novel is just a bind up of multiple single issues. So the single issues come out with more frequency, obviously, and are a little bit smaller. So for example, in this first volume of Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire, there are, I think, 5 or 6 single issues compiled into one. For me, I prefer consuming trade paperbacks because single issues are too much of a tease for me. I can't wait that long to find out what happens next. I can barely wait in between trade paperbacks. So, but again, you need to do what works for you. So while I have it in my hand, the first series I want to recommend is Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. If you've been watching me for the past few months, you know that I just recently read all 6 volumes of this, and this is actually the 6th one that's in my hand. I absolutely loved it, and it's the story of a United States kind of post-pandemic, and most of the population has died off, and some of the children that were born during this epidemic are born with half human and half animal characteristics as far as their physicality goes. You can see some of them there, maybe. And so the story follows this kid who's been nicknamed Sweet Tooth, and he is he's this guy here. As he's on a quest to kind of find out why he and these kids have been born this way, and also discover kind of the story of his father and mother as well. It's a really awesome series. It's really beautiful and heartbreaking. I feel like the paneling is done really well, so for beginners it's not that hard to follow. Most of it's very straightforward. So again, it's not that hard to follow. And it was just a really exciting series. There are a couple of character lines that kind of intertwine, and I really appreciated all of them. The next series I want to recommend is Amulet by Kazu Kibushi, and this is upside down and backwards. Oh my god, what have I done? Amulet by Kazu Kibushi. This is a middle grades comic series, and it wasn't ever published in issues, so you just get the volumes. So there are 6 volumes. I've read the first 3. I'm planning on reading the next 3 very soon. But it's a story of these kids and their mother. And at the very beginning, their father dies in a tragic accident. And so they move to their grandfather's old house. They unlock some secrets of this house, kind of fall through into another world, and shit gets real from there. I can't give too much away, of course, but that's like the first quarter of the first book here. And again, in this one, the paneling's super easy to follow. I think that the art is absolutely beautiful, and if I can give you some examples of some of the full page spreads, it's really fun. And I recommend this one for beginners too, because there's not a ton of text to a page because it is middle grades, so it's a lot easier to follow, especially for adult readers. And it's just all over good fun and really exciting. So there's that one. The last recommendation I have is probably going to come to no surprises to anyone, but I do recommend Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is where I got started, which is part of the reason why I recommend it. I started reading comics about the time when the Saga craze like really hit BookTube. I wasn't even making videos yet, but I was watching a lot of BookTube, and that's when I started reading comics. The reasons that I recommend this is because it's very accessible. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody loves it. You can find all kinds of information about it all over the internet. The characters are really cool. It's a really engaging story, especially in the first 3 volumes. Not the biggest fan of the most recent 2, but the first 3 volumes are fantastic. So if you would like to go this route, you can. You can also right now buy the deluxe edition of the first 3 volumes, which is really beautiful. And then you have an even longer book to get into. So if you're worried about not being able to continue with the series right away, you can do that, or you can just buy the first volume and kind of try it out, and if you hate it, no harm done. You could also get it from your library. That works too. Personally, though, I think even better than starting with series, I think it'd be a little bit easier to start with standalones, because then there's no pressure to continue on with the series. You're not committing yourself to 6 trade paperbacks worth of 1 story. You can just sit down and read a single story in a single book. So the first one I have is a graphic memoir. This is Relish by Lucy Nisley. It's called My Life in the Kitchen, and this is just the story of Lucy Nisley growing up, and her parents were kind of foodies. It's about her kind of getting into the food world and learning what she likes and doesn't like about food. It has these really cool recipes in it, which I love. The style is pretty simple, very cartoony, and it's just a really light and fun story. So I think that this would be really fun. It's a super fast read, and it's really engaging. I have another graphic memoir, and that's Persepolis by Marjan Satrapi. So this edition I have here is the complete Persepolis, but you can actually buy this split into 2 books as well. And this is another graphic memoir about Satrapi's life growing up during the Iranian Revolution, and the time that she spent away from Iran because her parents sent her to Western Europe. And it's so poignant and so important, and gives insight into a culture that a lot of people are not familiar with. It's very personal, very emotional. It's a very powerful work of feminist memoir, I guess. It's not fiction. And again, the paneling so easy to follow on this one. It's all black and white, so your eyes aren't going to explode when you look at it. You know, I really did. I had such a hard time when I first started out with all of the information I was getting off the page at just like one glance. And so something like this is great because it's not such an assault on your senses. So I highly, highly recommend this. It's so important. Next, I have a young adult graphic novel standalone. This is This One Summer by Jillian and Mariko Tamaki, who are cousins. They're Canadian artists. And this is a young adult coming of age tale about two young girls who spend their summers together every summer because their parents rent cottages near one another, and just kind of about them coming into themselves and realizing who they are and what they want, as a brief synopsis. This, again, is really nice because it's done monochromatically, so, again, like Persephone's, it's not so assaulting. There's not so much color and all kinds of stuff. It's also just a quiet and a bit of a slower story. It's a bit more of a character study for those of you who really like literary fiction and aren't so into like the sci-fi fantasy comic types. And yeah, there are full pages like this with no text on them, which are outstanding. The art and the writing are great, and it's something that I didn't think that I liked very much when I first read it, but that I've really come to appreciate since then. And lastly, I could not have a video about graphic novels without recommending Nimona. This was probably my favorite graphic novel of 2015, and this is the story of Nimona, who is sidekick to an evil villain type, and they are trying to stop the heroic prince. So this kind of twists fantasy, sci-fi, and superhero tropes on its head. It's really fun, but also very poignant. Teaches you a lot about life and about how you choose to identify and what good and evil really mean. It's very nicely done, kind of in this cartoon style. And again, the paneling, super easy to follow. So some comic books have like crazy paneling where like it's just hard to figure out where to go next. But all of the ones I've recommended today, I think, are really accessible in the way that they're laid out. So that is all I have for you today. If you have any other recommendations of good places to start with graphic novels and comics, please feel free to share those in the comments. And if you have any questions, let me know. Bye!